Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, back for week 3 of my LPL weekly review. I hope you all are having a wonderful weekend here, and I hope you continue to have a wonderful weekend or a wonderful whatever day you end up watching this. I want to jump right into the games because we do have a lot of them, of course, with the LPL, but I do want to preface it first. If you guys do not watch my LCK weekly reviews, then you will not know that I am actually doing a little bit of a format change for this video, at least for the visuals. Instead of the player of the series and the dud of the series being kind of the central focus in the visuals on the screen, I've gone ahead and included the drafts, each team, what each team's composition was for each game, as well as all the players and their score lines for the entire series up on the screen. Some people were asking for just a little bit more information, and I'm happy to oblige, so that's going to go ahead and be the new visual format. I hope you guys enjoy that. Go ahead and tell me how that is down in the comment section below if you didn't already in the LCK video. But without further ado, I don't want to waste too much time on the intro here because, of course, we do have a ton of stuff to get into. So let's get into our first series of the week, and that was OMG, oh my god, taking on eStar Gaming in a 2-1 victory for eStar here. eStar has started off the season in pretty good fashion. I had them projected as, I think, the worst team in the LPL. They are clearly not that. They clearly have talent here, and it's showing in the first couple weeks. They're not necessarily like maybe a playoff team, but I think they're definitely better than that bottom tier of inconsistent players, or as inconsistent teams, rather. You know, I'm not going to group them with like ThunderTalk and LGD. They're definitely better, and OMG, I guess, is kind of in that group too. They're definitely better than that. Game 1 was kind of an OMG, stomp. They had trouble closing out. OMG does this, by the way, where they have a really, really strong game in the series and then look irrelevant for the rest of the series, which is exactly what happened here. OMG took game 1 and then just kind of faded into the background for both games 2 and 3. Hacker was really, really, really good this series. He's going to be my player of the series, even in their loss. I thought he was pretty good on that Olaf. Not quite as good as Zeus, or ZS, ZS, whatever it is. But Hacker is going to be my player of the series. He was really, really instrumental in Game 3, especially on that Pantheon to their win. And even in Game 2, he had a very good Lee Sin performance as well. Aki is going to be my dud of the series, which is a little unfortunate. He just got out-jungled for most of the series. That Game 3, especially on the Olaf, was not pretty. He really had no impact on the map, and the Pantheon was just creating plays. Really, really difficult for him to do anything here. But overall, I think these two teams are maybe not in the exact same tier, but in very close tiers. eStar, I think, being a little bit better, but I'm not necessarily sure I'm willing to consider eStar a playoff team. I do think this is a solid win, and like I always say, you do have to beat up on the bottom teams in the LPL if you really want to be a playoff team, because those are the teams that end up sneaking in, the ones that don't drop games, or series, I should say, to teams like OMG. So if eStar can just continue on that path, potentially, I guess they could surprise everyone and sneak into the playoffs. That's going to take us to our second series of day 1 of week 3, and that's going to be Bilibili Gaming taking on Victory 5 in another 2-1 series win, this time for Victory 5. A very close series here. I thought both teams played relatively well. BLG took that game 1 off of a fantastic performance by Meteor, who honestly was fantastic throughout the entire series. He honestly might be player of the series, but it was just hard for me to give player of the series to someone who did not win. But Meteor was fantastic this series. He's actually had a very, very good year, a very good bounce back year after what was a rough 2020 so far, at least. But V5 was able to come through in games 2 and 3 here. Nothing too extraneous to talk about in the drafts. I think the Kalista Taric duo is maybe a little bit outdated. I'm not quite sure it works quite as well as it used to. And that kind of showed in game 2 where that bot lane just did not do well. Got absolutely obliterated by Y4. But outside of that, I think the drafts were okay. I don't really think this was like a draft diff series. I think V5 is just probably the better team. Victory 5 has kind of come out and said, hey, don't forget us. We were almost a Worlds team last year, and we only upgraded. So we're bringing in Longxing. Mole is going to be my player of the series. He's actually as well having a fantastic year. He's definitely been the best performing, or the most consistent performing member of this Victory 5 team. I definitely put him in my top 5 of MVP voting. so far. He's had a very, very good start to the year. His Zoe is just incredible. He's one of the best Zoes in the world. He showed that in Game 3, especially where he just completely took over. So props to Mole. I think Weiwei is playing well as well. I think he maybe is a little more inconsistent than Mole, but that mid-jungle duo is really propelling Victory 5 to a lot of wins. As for the outlooks of these teams, Victory 5 is a decent team. We'll see if they can become a contender. I'm not necessarily willing to clump them in the same group as like the top tier teams right now, but do I think they could get there? Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially with Mole and Weiwei playing like this. If they just continue to do that, that's fine. Not a terrible loss here for BLG. Victory 5 being one of the better teams in the league. Not terrible to take them to 3 games and actually look really, really good in Game 1. And then Game 3 was pretty close. So, and a lot to talk about with Meteor there. My dud of the series is going to be aiming. Just this bot lane in general was probably the dud of the series. This could have been Bubu in the top lane who just died over and over and over again. But I think he had 7 deaths in 2 games. But he was actually able to impact a lot of the team fights even though he was dying. So I wanted to give it to Aiming because I thought he had a much less important impact on the series overall. Aiming was having a really good year up until this series. Definitely his worst series of the year. I'm not going to take too much stock into that because, again, he's been really good. But just something to note that he didn't play quite perfectly in this series. Either way, not really too worried about BLG. They are a pretty team. They're going to sit in that 8 to 14 range the entire year. We'll just see if they can sneak into that final playoff spot. That's going to bring us to our first series of Day 2 of Week 3 of the LPL, and that is going to be Rogue Warriors taking on FunPlus Phoenix in a 2-0 sweep for FPX. This is the FPX that we really wanted to see. We were, obviously a lot of people had quite a few concerns for this roster going into this year just from how they played last year. But they've pretty much, gotten rid of all those concerns, at least for me. They've looked very, very, very consistent so far this year. I'm a big fan of what this team has been able to do. And I really think that they're going to be a top-tier team that I don't know if they're necessarily the best team in the league, but I think they're getting slept on as they're pretty easily one of the top 3 teams in the league for me. LWX is going to be my player of the series. He is having a fantastic bounce back here after what was a very rough 2020 for him, just a very inconsistent 2024. This bot lane, he has actually been really, really good and kind of the catalyst for this entire team at the beginning of the year here. Forge is going to be my dud of the series. He just got absolutely outclassed by Doan B the entire series. When you pick assassins like that, you kind of need to win. You can't really fall behind because you're not going to have too much of an impact if you're not doing damage. And Forge got behind both games pretty hard. Doan B on the rise both games. Really, really just outclassed him. I've never been a huge fan of Forge. Back IG Academy. Back when he was on Vici. Just never really been my cup of tea. I always thought he was a little too aggressive and not consistent. That's definitely showing up here on this Rogue Warriors team. Important to note for Rogue Warriors that their bot lane has switched out. Michi is in, and so is Reheal instead of Cullen and Chocho, which if this series and the series later this week is to go off of, I consider that a downgrade. They don't seem to be nearly as ready to play as Cullen and Chocho have been. However, I can see if you want, Chocho is not necessarily a young player, and I can see if you necessarily want to go in a more young direction, considering you're not expecting to win this year, already. But I thought Cullen actually was decent towards the beginning of this year, and I'm not necessarily sure why you would switch him out for Michi. But this team obviously knows a lot more than I do about their players, so I'm going to take it for a grain of salt right now. That being said, FPX looks very, very solid. The entire team looked consistent. They just looked like they dominated the map. They were just the better team. They won in 22 minutes in Game 2. This series was never really that close. They were just dominant. They were just the better team pretty much the entire time. As for Rogue Warriors, they're exactly what we thought they are. They're a bottom-tier team, which is fine. They had that ridiculous upset win over top earlier this year, but that does not look like it's going to mean any fortune for this roster. That looks like an outlier in a season that is probably going to be a little bit depressing for Rogue Warrior fans. Next up, we've got our second series of Day 2, and that is going to be Edward Gaming, EDG, taking on LGD Gaming in a 2-0. Not I mean, semi-competitive sweep. Game 1 wasn't super competitive, but Game 2 I thought was really, really close. EDG is just super duper good, aren't they? Like, they are just dominant at times. This roster, you know, you can talk what you want about Clearlove not being in. JJ is fantastic, and he has been playing super, super well. Him and Viper have really, really been the catalysts for this team to become what is one of the best teams in the entire world. Viper is going to be my player of the series. He's actually also going to be my player of the week here. We're going to get into, he had 2 series this week where he was fantastic. So Viper is going to go ahead and be my player of the week here for EDG. He played Xayah both games here, which is not even a top tier AD carry. Xayah is definitely considered a step down, but even on the Xayah, he was absolutely outclassing Garvey, who is my dud of the series, who was on, you know, the top tier pick in Kai'Sa every single game. Viper was just fantastic. Garvey is definitely not the answer here. He had a pretty decent start to the year. That first series of the year for LGD, he was pretty good, but he has really, really cooled off. And he actually, you know, Kramer obviously having some trouble with coming over here, but he is now, he is here by the end of the week, and he is going to be put into the lineup in their second series. So Garvey, you know, this performance looks like it spells the end of his starting time here on LGD, at least for now. As for the outlooks of these teams, for EDG, everything is clicking. Flandre is really consistent in the top lane. JJ and Viper are completely taking over games. Scout is being that facilitative, more control mage style, that Victor, that Zoe. You know, we can see him pull out the Orianna. Exactly what you want to see from Scout. And Mako has definitely turned it around from last year. He's had, you know, I don't want to give all the praise to Viper because Mako is also doing a good job in helping control this lane. You got to give credit to the support as well as the AD when the bot lane is winning. EDG looks dominant. I know LGD is a bottom tier team, so I don't want to put too much stock into a 2-0 victory here where the players look this good, but it is important to note that they are gelling very, very well together. As for LGD, they're a bottom tier team, as most of us expected. You know, when you restart this roster with a bunch of players who, you know, haven't played together before and also don't really have any sort of competitive experience, it's going to be really tough for you to look good, and that's exactly what's happening right now. They don't look good. I thought in Game 2 it was a lot closer. Garvey had some good, you know, team fights towards the end as Kai'Sa. You know, you pick up kills. I thought Colt actually played relatively well in Game 2 as well, but not enough to take down EDG, of course. They're just the better team with better hands. And you know what they say in the LPL, better hands wins. So with that being said, I don't think LGD is going to be competing for a playoff spot. I think they're in that clump of bottom tier teams, and EDG is actually, you know, kind of the opposite. They are absolutely going to be competing for a championship as long as things continue to go right. On to day 3 now, with our first series of day 3, which is going to be Invictus Gaming taking on eStar. Now, this is kind of why I wasn't super excited about eStar earlier. I didn't want to talk about this series too much in that review. However, this was not super close. Game 1 was close. Game 2 was absolutely not. Invictus Gaming with the 2-0 sweep here. IG bouncing back from what was a rough start to the year. No, not a rough start to the year. A good start to the year. I'm trolling everybody. I'm just confusing them with top, I guess. I don't know what's going on. Invictus continues to roll here, is what I should have said. June is going to be my player of the series. He's looked really good since coming in. If a little bit inconsistent, not necessarily always perfect, but when he gets ahead, especially on this Pantheon pick, which he's been really consistent on the entire year. Pantheon and Nidalee have really, really been his bread and butter the entire year. He's going to get Nidalee banned out against him probably the entire rest of the year. But if he can perform like this on picks like Pantheon, picks like Olaf, then I think he's going to be absolutely fine here. This entire team has just honestly become consistent except for the Shy. The Shy was my dud of the week last week, and he didn't necessarily turn that around completely this week. Even in their dominant win in Game 2, he was still dying on the Gnar. Hacker, you know, doing his best to kind of bring the game back top lane. Hacker as well, who had he's had a fantastic week. He's actually also had a really, really good year. He's not going to be in that MVP conversation because, of course, eStar isn't good enough. But if he was on a better team, he absolutely would be. Someone who's not in the MVP conversation is going to be Rat, who is my dud of the series here. 0-9-5, just a really, really tough series. Completely outclassed by Wink and Balan. Wink is another guy who had a really, really solid series here. I just thought June was a little bit better. But just outclassed. Xiaoxi has really been... He was really good towards the beginning of this year, and when they're winning, he looks really good. He did not look good in this series. I know, like I always say, it's tough for a support to look good when you are this far behind. However, he was getting caught making some poor plays on that Galio. Not that guy's a Galio lane did not work is all I'm really willing to say here. You could theoretically give Shousey my dud of the series as well here, but I wanted to give it to Rat. I thought he was a little bit worse. 0 kills in 2 games as an AD carry is pretty unacceptable. So he is going to be my dud of the series. However, there are positives. I think, like I said, Hacker is looking good. I think ZS is looking good as well. That top jungle, I think, is definitely your strong point. Irma's just kind of meh. He's not bad. He's not great. He's just kind of there, which is something you'd expect from a middle tier team. As for the outlooks, again, IG is trying to look for a championship here, which they absolutely should. This team has the talent to do it. And then eStar is looking to make playoffs. IG's not the worst loss in the world, obviously. However, they're going to need to start picking up some wins here if they want to be a little bit more consistent. Moving on to our second series of day 3, and that is going to be Suning taking on Rare Adam in a 2-0, what many would consider quite a big upset here for Rare Adam. Suning did not have a good week. We are going to get into that later, but this is a very, very big win for a team that did not necessarily look too good out of the box last week. Game 1 was I guess both games were close. Rare Adam was decently ahead in game 2. They had a tough time closing it out, but they did eventually end up getting there. My player of the series is going to go ahead and be Fofo on this Zoe. He was very, very, very good. This is his best pick. We've known that for years, ever since I believe he was the first person to play Zoe professionally back at MSI when she came out. But this is absolutely his best pick. You want to get him on the Zoe as much as possible. He is absolutely facilitating on this pick. As for the rest of the team, it was all fine. iBoy is looking decent this year, which I think is definitely good considering he did not have the best of 2020s. So for him to be coming out in 2021, looking pretty decent here, I think is a good sign. Him and Hang have had some pretty decent chemistry down there in the bot lane. Cube is definitely going to be the weakness for this roster, which isn't too big of a deal. However, it was not punished at all this series. My dud of the series is going to be SOFM. It absolutely could have been Bin. It could have been Bin or SOFM. It could have been either. SOFM is actually also going to be my dud of the week here as well. This was not a good week for this top jungle duo here in Suning that was so dominant at the World Championships. Probably the biggest reason why this team made it to the World Finals here. They have come out really, really slow here. Even in their wins, I don't think they were necessarily like dominant. They looked fine. Angel has probably been the most consistent member of this roster, which is not something I would have expected to say at the beginning of the year. Huanfeng's had a good year, however, he dies a lot. He kind of has to because he does have to carry a lot of these team fights, but as you're looking at team outlooks here, big win for Rare Adam here. They're looking to make playoffs, and to take down Suning in a 2-0 especially is a very, very, very big W for this roster. As for Suning, a tough loss here. You really wanted to win this after such a good start to the year. However, it didn't end up working out like that. Hopefully they can bounce back. I'm not going to talk too much about their series later in the week. We will get to that, but definitely not what you wanted to see after what was a fantastic start to the year with that win over top, and then continuing to roll at least a little bit for Suning here. Not really the momentum that you wanted to see after week 3. That's going to go ahead and take us to day 4, and our first game of day 4 in the LPL week 3 is going to be ThunderTalk Gaming taking on Team WE here in what is potentially a matchup between the best and the worst team in the league here. WE with an easy 2-0 sweep to absolutely no one's surprise. There was really no challenge here. TT is definitely one of the bottom 2 to 3 teams in the league. WE, I think, has proven at this point that they are one of the top 3 teams in the league as well. My player of the series is going to go to Shanks. Both games on the Zoe here, he looked fantastic, especially that game 2. I believe he had 10 kills in that game 2. A very, very, very strong performance here. I don't want to talk about WE too much because I'm just going to be repeating what I said last week, but we'll get into them a little bit more later in the week as well. As for ThunderTalk, my dud of the series is going to be Sam D. This is not what you wanted to see from Sam D. He was kind of supposed to be your veteran presence, your more consistent presence, especially coming in from Victory 5 last year. He has not been that. He dies a lot. 7 deaths in game 1, 8 deaths in game 2. Just not what you want to see from an AD carry. He has been caught out of position a lot, especially, I know he had that Jhin play a couple weeks ago that was just very, very strange. Not what you wanted to see from the guy that was supposed to be the veteran presence coming into this roster. Of course, there is a roster substitution for you in this series. You're bringing in Twyla and taking out Captain. Of course, Twyla with a little bit more LPL experience than Captain. However, I'm not necessarily convinced, especially after this series, that was the right move. I think Captain has significantly more upside than Twyla, and I think Twyla is not nearly good enough to justify playing him over Captain, because I would argue that Captain is better right now and has more upside. So I'm not super for that roster move. However, it did happen here in this series. As for the outlooks of these teams, like I said, WE is rolling. They're one of the best teams in the entire league. Jiaming with 17 kills in this series looked absolutely aggressive. He's going to die a couple times by being a little over-aggressive. That's just the player that he is. But you have Breathe, fantastic series on the Gangplank here. Beishang, rather. We're going to talk about him later in the week as well, but he had a very good series here on the Nidalee. Just a very, very solid outlook here from WE. And as for ThunderTalk, like we expected, they're just going to be bottom of the barrel. They're probably going to be maybe a little less competitive than we even expected, which is probably not the sentence you wanted to hear at the beginning of the year. Moving on to our second series of Day 3, and that's going to be OMG, oh my god, taking on Royal Never Give Up in what is, I believe, a Worlds semi-final rematch from the 2013 World Championships. If that's right, fantastic. If that's wrong, I'm so sorry. But I'm pretty sure these teams faced off in the semifinals of the 2013 World Championships. Two very historic LPL organizations. RNG is much better this year than OMG is, clearly. However, the series was relatively close. Both games I thought were relatively close. Game 2 a little bit less so, but Game 1 I thought was pretty well played by OMG. That's essentially the role that they've fit into this entire year is we're not going to win, but we're going to look pretty decent in our losses, and that's fine. Royal, however, looking really, really good. Gala is going to be my player of the series. He looked fantastic. That Game 1 was nuts on the Aphelios. He just got rolling. He got so far ahead. By the late game, no one could deal with him. He was doing so much damage that there was really nothing that OMG was going to be able to do at that point. And then even in Game 2, he was still fantastic. That Samira was very, very, very good as well. Royal looks really, really solid. Like I said in my preseason predictions for this team, I thought the Xiaohu Cryan lineup had a lot of upside depending on how Xiaohu transitioned into that top lane. And he did it super, super well. Obviously, the draft was very weird. In these two series, you had the Renekton and the Jax mid quite a few times. Renekton mid in Game 1 for Wooming, and then Jax mid in Game 2 for Wooming, and Renekton in mid for Cryan in Game 3. And then it's just a very weird draft. Orianna was kind of a takeaway pick, I think, in Game 2. Orianna, of course, being a flex for this RNG team with Xiaohu, showing that he is willing to play that in the top lane. And actually, if you're playing into something like Rumble, like in the Game 1, I don't hate that idea at all. Or if you show the Jax, that's a good matchup into Jax as well. So, there's a lot of interesting stuff here that RNG can do with their draft. OMG tried to be a little creative and outdraft the team that is, uniquely suited in the draft, which I commend them for. I commend them for trying. However, they're just not as good. They're not good enough to pull that off, nor do I think it's really their style. I should note that Bright did come in for New in this series. So New is out, Bright is in. New had looked very poor in the first couple series. He had some moments here and there on Aatrox especially. Really, it's only on Aatrox. He only looked real good on Aatrox, but Bright comes in here and looks a lot more consistent, especially in that Game 2. On that Orianna, he looked pretty good. Even on the Rumble, I don't think he looked that bad. So, I definitely think this is the direction you go in for the future with OMG. Wooming is going to be my dud of the series, mostly just because going into Cryan, you have a guy playing Renekton who probably doesn't have a ton of experience on Renekton. You pull out the Jax. You probably have even less experience on Jax than he has on Renekton. It doesn't work. The Jax wasn't terrible in Game 2. However, his Game 1 was really not good. He got obliterated by that Orianna on the Renekton. It's just a tough matchup for him to deal with. He gets zoned out, and he can easily get killed there, which is what we saw basically out of Cryan. Cryan had a really good series. He could have been the player of the series. However, I thought Gala was a little more impactful. He kind of took over that Game 1, but and I thought he was a little bit better in Game 2 as well. But either way, OMG is going to be that team that's going to be a tough out, but is never really going to be a winner. And then RNG is one of the best teams in the league. They're up there with WE, with FPX, EDG. Those, what year is it, right? That's the meme right now at the LPL. But those are going to be definitely your top tier teams in the league this year. Hopefully RNG can continue to stick with them, but for that, we're going to have to wait and see. Now we move on to day 5, and our first series of day 5 is going to be Rare Adam taking on Bilibili Gaming in what I am officially calling the Meteor Revenge game here. I'm not gonna, I don't talk about, weird public drama on this channel here, but if you're interested in what happened between Meteor and Fofo, obviously Fofo being on BLG last year, you can go ahead and look that up for yourself. However, you can tell Meteor came out in this series very focused and very, very willing to dominate, take over. Meteor is going to be my player of the series because it is the Meteor Revenge series. He probably isn't player of the series. If no storyline here at all, I probably give the player of the series to Mark. Mark was fantastic on this Alistar, absolutely taking over both games. I mean, Alistar's one of those champs where if you can get ahead and if you can really get in on Alistar, if you're good at Alistar, then you just completely take over games. You make fights incredibly difficult to win, and that's exactly what Mark did. He was probably the better player and player of the series, but how can I not give it to Meteor just because of the storyline here? And in the same token, how can I not give the dud of the series here to Fofo, who was not good? He got completely outclassed here by Zika, which is not what you want to see. Game 1, going into the Syndra did not look good. Game 2, going into the Galio. Galio just roamed all over the map. He could not make plays on the Zoe fast enough to really make up for that. So, a very, very good series here for Zika, not for Fofo. I thought iBoy, however, played relatively well. It was kind of tough for him to make an impact in this game. There were so many engage tools for BLG. You had the Gragas and the Alistar in Game 1. You had the Camille and the Galio and the Alistar in Game 2. Just very, very difficult for iBoy to stay alive here on the Xayah. However, I thought he did a pretty decent job in those team fights. Not the best, but something. Leon did come in here for Ikes in the jungle for Rare Adam. I do think Leon's the better player. I'm not sure if there was something going on with him at the beginning of the year, if there was a reason why he wasn't in the lineup, but he is in the lineup now. I like Leon as a player. He had a decent series on the Lilia and the Nidalee. However, his team kind of let him down a little bit here. Just not a lot of consistency. As for the outlooks of these teams, they're kind of both in a very similar spot. They're both vying for that 8th, 9th, 10th playoff spot, with the LPL, of course, expanding to 10 playoff spots this year. So this one's going to be really big for BLG, especially 2-0, because you really got to pick up wins against the teams around you as well as the bottom teams. And, for Bilibili, they're just going to have that one extra win on their resume as opposed to Rare Adam. And hopefully, we'll see, but that might help them push for that final playoff spot. Moving on to the second game of day 5, and that was going to be what I projected to be the series of the week, but what ended up being a little, I wouldn't say one-sided, because it was still pretty close, but a little more one-sided than maybe we expected. And that's going to be Edward Gaming taking on JD Gaming here. A 2-0 sweep here by EDG is a massive showing. Of course, I had JDG power ranked as my number 1 team after last week, which, it might have been controversial. I'm really not quite too sure there. But either way, EDG has proven that they are one of the best teams, if not the best team in China right now. And that's really, really big. Of course, this series was close. Game 1 was pretty close. Game 2 wasn't as close, but it was, EDG just have a lot more trouble finishing off the game. Kind of going down, what ended up happening, my player of the series is going to be JJ, like I was talking about earlier. Him and Viper have really been the catalyst for this team. Viper as well had a fantastic series, that 10-1-5 game on Xayah in Game 2. He's shown that he's one of the most proficient, if not the most proficient Xayah in the world right now. A pick that's not even really that dominant. He's dominating on. So really good to see there. JJ has also been fantastic. He went up against one of the best junglers in the entire world in Kanavi, and he looked really, really good in both matchups, the Nidalee and the Taliyah. The Taliyah into Lilia matchup particularly, I don't think is necessarily the hardest, but I thought he looked very, very good in that one. As for the rest of the team, what can I say that I didn't say earlier? Flandre and Scout are incredibly consistent. Scout was a little bit over-aggressive here. The LeBlanc pick, I don't really understand. I think there's better picks than LeBlanc. Akali was left up and not selected. I think you just pick Akali over LeBlanc there, at least in my opinion. But of course, Scout has played a lot of LeBlanc, so I can understand why he might be a little bit more familiar with that. But that would be my only gripe with him. As for JD Gaming, you keep Yagao in here. You look pretty decent. However, not sure it really works. You're really, really needing to get Mystic in here. I know he's having trouble coming back in from Korea here, but the faster you can get GA and Mystic in here, the better. They are absolutely going to be your better mid-AD duo. And, you really need to do that before you suffer too many losses. Of course, this EDG loss isn't going to be too bad, especially if the team finishes as one of the best teams in the league. Losing to them isn't a terrible loss. However, you don't want to continue losing. This is a team that currently, if the standings were to end today, is out of the playoffs, which is unacceptable, obviously, for JD Gaming. I don't expect them to stay there. You're going to see my power rankings. It's not like I have them drop too far, but definitely a little bit concerning. Zoom is going to be my dud of the series. He kind of got outclassed by Flandre, and yes, Flandre has been having a fantastic season, and honestly, he's been sneakily fantastic for the last 3 years, but not what you wanted to see out of Zoom. He's had kind of a rough start to the year. He really needs to turn that around. He's also going to be a big part, not just GA Mystic. He's also going to be a big part in realizing this team's potential. So if he can get it together, hopefully the rest of the team can as well. Hopefully they can get their full roster together, and hopefully they can turn it around and be the dominant team that we know they can be. That's going to bring us into day 6 of our Week 3 LPL. I guess Week 3. Kind of a weird way to say it, but that's the take we're going with, I guess. And that's going to be Top Esports taking on LGD Gaming in a 2-0 sweep here for Top. Top, obviously, with a really, really rough start to the year. Not exactly what you wanted to see from the defending LPL champions for, world semifinalists. Arguably the best player in the world in the mid lane. But they're turning it around here for sure. Of course, I don't know how much stock to put into this win in particular because LGD is a bottom tier team. I mean, they are one of the bottom 2 to 3 teams in the entire league. So, it's not the most impressive victory, but obviously just getting rolling in the first place is very good. Jackie Love looked monstrous this series, and that's going to be really, really big for this team. He is going to be my player of the series here. He just looked dominant. Like, he was just constantly aggressing and constantly, pushing out Kramer. Oh, by the way, Kramer is in the lineup for this game. He did return here. Not exactly the return you wanted to see. He looked completely outclassed here by Jackie Love and Juo as well. Chance is going to be my dud of the series. This bot lane in general just looked very, very, very outclassed, which is kind of rough because that is the strength of this team, or at least that's what you would assume would be the strength of this team is Kramer, right? And if he's getting absolutely destroyed in lane, then oops, that's kind of a problem. The rest of the team played really, really well. You put Knight here on the rise in game 2. I actually really, really like that for this team. Let them, go a little bit more aggressive, in that 1-3-1 style. I thought it worked really, really well for this roster with the Gnar. You did go ahead and take Gragas in the jungle, which I think is an interesting flex here for Karsa. It worked in this game, but I'm not sure it's going to work against better teams in the league. Maybe that's what they were just testing about how much, how much of an impact this Gragas jungle can still have. It's an okay pick. However, I don't see why you would ever go it. You end up going, full AP here. I believe he went full AP both games. I could be wrong. I know he went Zanya's both games, but I believe he went full AP both games. And, I just think there's better options out there. Obviously, Talia was up in both games. And, I'm not really too sure why you would pick, Gragas over Talia. But, it is what it is there. LGD's bad. It is what it is. TES, a good sign, a good turnaround sign for them, especially that game 2 where they just looked really, really good. If Jackie Love can continue to be this dominant with Juo really stepping up and them, forming a really solid bot lane duo, and then Knight and 369 and Karsa playing that more supportive style, maybe that 1-3-1 style with Knight and 369 in those side lanes, I could really see this team turning it around. Obviously, we know they have the talent, but it's just about whether or not they can put it together. Moving on to our second game of day 6, and that is going to be FunPlus Phoenix taking on Suning in a 2-0 sweep here for FunPlus. Not a good week if you are a Suning fan, but a very, very good win here if you are an FPX fan. Not like a dominant series win. Both games were close. However, it's good to see FPX be able to pull out these slow, methodical victories because that was kind of a concern, I think. What were they going to be able to do if games were even? Do they have the hands to be able to pull it off? They definitely did in this series. One big roster change to note, Bo came in for Tion. Tion is having wrist problems, so I don't know how long that's going to keep him out. However, Bo did come in, and he looked okay in this series. Is definitely not Tion in terms of skill, but he didn't look too bad. Nuguri is going to be my player of the series here. He looked very, very good, especially in that game 2 on the Gnar. He really took over those fights. He was on Gnar both games, if I remember correctly, but he looked very, very good in that game 2, especially. Bin is going to be my dud of the series here. He did not look good. It's kind of a toss-up whether Bin or SOFM is my dud of the week. However, I did end up giving it to SOFM. I think you could realistically give it to Bin as well. One of them is going to be my dud of the week. One of them isn't. So, take your pick on which one you guys thought was worse. The drafts here were very interesting. Game 1 draft was the most interesting because not only did you have Jarvan in the jungle, which is kind of a weird pick now, but, the only time we've seen Jarvan in pro this year so far is in the LCK as a support. And, we also had Doenby on Victor, which is, so weird. Like, it kind of freaked me out. Like, I was like, whoa, he's just playing a control mage? Thankfully, we got back to normal when he went to Kled in game 2. And I was like, yes, Doenby's back. But, for the first game, I was like, whoa, the Victor. He actually played really, really well on the Victor. He was much better on the Victor than he was on the Kled. But we know he doesn't like to play those control mages in the mid lane. It's fine. The Kled pick was interesting. It works with the Taliyah. I don't think it's Taliyah's best combo or anything like that, but, I can see it working out. LWX, another really solid series here. He's just been really, really consistent. This team in general has been really consistent. He was almost my player of the week here. I did end up giving it to Viper. However, LWX was an honorable mention for that player of the week. He looked very good here. Outside of that, Suning with a pretty big fall this week. Starting the year 1-0 against top esports, you're like, whoa! And then you lose all three of your next series, and you're like, oh, oh man. And now that top esports victory isn't even looking that good. So Suning may be a little bit overhyped from what we were saying after the end of week 1. However, they still have time to bounce back. We expected Bin and SOFM to be able to carry this team. They've kind of been the weak points, which is unfortunate. If they can bounce back, I think this team's fortune turns around a lot. But who knows what's going to happen with this team now. Moving on to our final day of LPL action in Week 3. Our first series is going to be Rogue Warriors taking on Victory 5 here. Victory 5 with a 2-0 sweep in 2 games that were not very close. They just looked like the better team. They weren't even playing their entire lineup here. Longsheng was out. Y4 was out. Audi and Trigger were in. Trigger had played a little bit earlier. He did not look good when he came in earlier this season for Y4. However, I think they felt like they could get away with it a little bit here against a weaker Rogue Warriors team, and they absolutely did. Their main members did step up quite a bit. Weiwei had a phenomenal series here. He is going to be my player of the series. This is the first time I get to talk about Udyr on this channel. Obviously, it's been picked a few times in Korea and the LEC by this point. However, those videos are not quite out yet. So let me go ahead and talk about this Udyr pick. Udyr just seems like a pick that you are like, okay, I really, really wanted Olaf, but Olaf got banned. And we need that kind of run at you engage. Let's go Udyr. And it either really works or it really doesn't. In this game, it really, really worked. Haro on the Lilia was really not able to do anything, which is kind of weird. I feel like Lilia is actually a pretty decent matchup into Udyr because she can just run away from him. She's one of the few champs that can kind of just run away. So, it's kind of concerning to see Haro get beat in that matchup. However, Weiwei played fantastic the entire series. He had a very good game 1 on Graves too. I don't want to take that away from him. My dud of the series is going to be Reheal down in the bottom lane. Like I said, Michi and Reheal are in here for Cullen and Chocho. And they definitely look like a downgrade. Reheal does not look good. I'm really not a big fan of the Rel pick right now. We're seeing it a ton in the LCK, and I've yet to really see it justify why you would pick it over some of the more experienced or the more established supports that we know. But either way, I guess I could see it work with Samira. It just did not work in the series. Michi and Reheal are maybe the worst bot lane in the LPL right now, and that's not good because you bring in Trigger here, who did not show well earlier in the year, and he absolutely obliterated the bot lane on Kai'Sa. And if someone like Trigger, who I don't consider to be one of the better ADs in the region, can obliterate you, this bot lane is very, very in trouble. Forge, another rough series. Ziv just isn't that kind of player that can take over games. Rogue Warriors was really kind of collapsing around us, and they don't really have a ton of win conditions anymore. As for Victory 5, this is a team that's going to sit right at the top of that, not quite the best teams in the league, but, pretty good ones. In that, they're going to be in that same conversation as Invictus Gaming. I'm trying to think of other teams, but I can't off the top of my head here. LNG, I think, is also in there. and they're going to look good. They're going to win against these lower teams. It's really going to be interesting to see if they can, compete against some of the better teams in the league. If they're going up against a WE or an EDG or an RNG, what they're going to be able to do. But for now, it's good to see Victory 5 winning games, especially with their backups in. That's going to bring us to our final series of the week, and that was LNG Esports taking on Team WE in a 2-0 sweep for WE. Of course, LNG with a very, very solid start to the year. Last week, 2-0ing Invictus Gaming. A pretty big upset there. They looked very, very good in that series. They take on a little bit more of an established, consistent team here in WE. And while they don't look terrible, they don't necessarily look like they're on the same level as WE. So maybe a little prematurely saying that they are a lot better than we expected. However, I still think WE is not a terrible loss for this roster. Player of the series is going to go to Beishang, who was dominant on this Graves. He completely took over the series. That game 2 was nuts. 14 kills on that Graves in game 2 in competitive is fantastic. Beishang is definitely in the top 3 for me in MVP voting this year. For me, so far, it's probably Viper, LWX, and Beishang. You got to give it to one of those guys. So far, for me at least, those have been the 3 best players in the LPL. But I think the rest of this team is doing really well as well. Zhao Ming, actually, this is probably his best series of the year so far. He looked really good on the Kai'Sa. He looked consistent is the thing that I really liked. He was not getting caught out and dying for random reasons. One thing I would be concerned about if I'm an LNG fan is they're potentially figured out in draft. Obviously, the Tristana was a huge pick for Light last week, but it did not. It's going to be taken away from him pretty much every game now. The Thrash is also taken away, so he can't play Aphelios. He's going to be forced onto the Xayah. It doesn't seem like he plays the Jhin or the Misfortune or anything that's not really a crit marksman, which is a little concerning, mostly just because that's what's good right now. It doesn't seem like he plays the meta picks, which is worrisome, but, if they can get a little bit more comfortable maybe on those off meta picks, Xayah's not like a terrible pick right now, so I don't hate it, just, maybe they've been figured out a little bit. My dud of the series is going to go to Icon. This is the Icon that we saw in 2020, the one that was just super inconsistent, that really wasn't able to make any sort of plays consistently. He did not look good in this series, was outclassed basically by Shanks. With Shanks kind of being what we expected to be the weakness of this WE roster, obviously, that's proven not to be true. He's had a really, really solid year so far. He was probably my player of the game in Game 1. He was really, really good. But either way, LNG, I don't think it's the worst loss in the world. Makuya kind of showed up. I thought he actually played pretty well. I'm not going to take too much away from him. I actually thought he went into Breathe rather successfully, and he was my big concern for this LNG roster. But, this is a team that I think is going to be sitting around that 5 to 10 range. I think they're probably a playoff team. I think that Tarzan and Icon, they're going to win enough games. They're maybe not going to be consistent, but they're going to win enough games to probably make it into playoffs. I don't think they're a contender. I don't think they're going to be on that same level as, any of those other teams. But do I think they're on the same level as maybe like a Victory 5 or like a BLG, something like that? Yeah, they're probably on that level. All right, and that is going to be the Week 3 LPL Weekly Recap. Up on the screen right now, you are going to see on the left the current standings for the LPL. On the right, my current power rankings after Week 3 for the LPL. We'll talk about the biggest risers and fallers of each. The biggest riser in the standings is, of course, Rare Adam, who was 0-1 after last week, but with a huge win here, a 2-0 series win over Suning, moving up 5 points. Suning is going to be the biggest faller in the standings, dropping down 7. A very bad week for Suning here. They're really collapsing after what we thought was a really big win against Top Esports. Power rankings, moving into the biggest risers and fallers there. The biggest riser in the power rankings is also going to be Rare Adam, but I do want to give an honorable mention to EDG, who is going to jump up to my number 1 spot with that win over LGD Gaming. They look like the best team in the LPL right now. I know Team WE has 2 more wins, but that's mostly because they've just played 1 extra series. So I'm going to give the advantage here to EDG. WE is going to be my second team here, and then FunPlus at third. I think those are pretty clearly the 3 best teams in the LPL. I think RNG is going to be close to that, but I don't think they're quite there yet. LGD Gaming, I think, could potentially get there once their lineup gets fully incorporated, but they're not there yet, so I can't quite put them up in that spot. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of the LPL Weekly Recap. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and leave a like to let me know that you guys enjoy this kind of content. Leave a comment if you guys disagree or want to add anything. I love reading you guys' comments. I do. I respond to a lot of you, so I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. I hope you continue to have a wonderful day, and I will see you all later.